Today on Locked On Rockies, even when it comes to having the best odds, the Rockies still can't get the number one overall pick in the draft.
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock on Rockies fans, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast for today, the 11th day of December in the year 2024. I'm your host of the Locked On Rockies podcast, Paul Holden, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day. If your team is the Colorado Rockies, guess what? You're in the right spot, because that's what we do around here each and every day, free and streaming on your favorite streaming services, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on that Locked On Podcast Network, including the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel, where you can be part of the show. You can fire off your Rockies hot takes. You can let me know what's on your mind when it comes to the Colorado Rockies. That's the best way to interact with the show. You can let me know what's on your mind. Head on over there. And we're so close to that 1,000 subscribers. Help us out there. Really, the best way to help the show grow is by going over to the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel, subscribing there, and firing off your Rockies hot takes in the Locked On Rockies YouTube comment section. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can get in on all the NFL action with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, the Rockies, even in their struggles, still have been unable to land that number one overall pick. That means no Ethan Holiday for the Rockies, which I was actually really looking forward to. I wasn't trying to get myself too excited, but because it is a lottery, and so it's not guaranteed, and there's some different things on how it works. According to the first mock draft from MLB Pipeline here, this is from Jim Callis on MLB.com, got the Rockies taking Jamie Arnold out of Florida State as a lefty with more track record of starting success and a better breaking ball. Arnold could edge out Bremner to become the first pitcher selected. They got the Mariners taking Tyler Bremner from UC Santa Barbara there at the 3 spot, which the Mariners got the 3 spot. Bremner has the best changeup in the draft, not to mention a quality fastball and slider and command. So the Gauchos could produce the first college pitcher taken for the second time in 11 drafts there. So initially here, I guess my main disappointment here is just the fact that they don't have a shot at the number one overall pick. And it's not to say that they can't have success with this. It's just, okay, drafting another pitcher, pretty much the same old thing. The thing that's disappointing about, and I know I did an episode about, does it really matter if the Rockies get the first overall pick a little bit ago, but when you have the number one overall pick, you can just create not only some buzz, but you have the opportunity to find to get the next best thing. And if you buy into a lot of things, if you buy into cool things about the Rockies, having a holiday son return to the Rockies and be successful would have been really, really, really cool. It also would have really, really helped the Rockies to have a prospect. And I know they got some entertaining ones, and they got some ones that were big deals. But there's a different air. There's a different energy. There's a different pulse around the number one pick. I mean, anybody the Rockies wanted. And yes, at 4, they're still going to have the massive pick of the litter, but they're not going to be able to grab that potential one and one guy. And it might pan out still with whoever the Rockies end up drafting. I'm just saying it's a shame that the Rockies haven't had the opportunity to draft that guy that just sets a lightning bolt through the system. Makes it so, holy cow, you got to watch the minors. You got to track this team. You got to track the path, because we got to see that guy in the majors. And it's disappointing, because me personally, And I'm sure there's more of some things, and I found a piece that'll help us dive into this, but just wanted to share my thoughts first. I just don't get the lottery, man. I don't think that yes, you're discouraging tanking, but you're not discouraging tanking through payrolls. Like there's other stuff that baseball does and the way baseball operates that doesn't discourage. You haven't done anything to discourage the A's from doing what they're doing and fielding the payroll that they have. Or, there's nothing what you're doing to prevent other teams that run cheap and go solely analytics. Like, and it doesn't pan out in XYZ. There's by just making it so you can't get good draft picks guaranteed and taking people out of the top contention for top picks if they got a top pick, their revenue share, blah, blah, blah. There's a few other things. As much as tanking is a real deal thing, you shouldn't be double punished for being bad. I guess is what I'm saying here. Because the Rockies now have been one of the worst teams in baseball. The Rockies had one of the worst records in baseball. And yes, they had the highest odds to get the first round pick, but they're falling to 4. A team that is bottom of the barrel falls to 4. The Marlins fell to 7. 7. And yes, they're all still great players that can be drafted within these opening rounds in the first round and that first top 10. But there's a massive difference between the number 1 overall pick and the 4th overall pick and the 7th overall pick. And for this to happen time and time and time again for the Rockies never to get the benefit of the highest draft pick in response to the struggles is something that I guess I don't fully comprehend. And to rely on the lottery. Me personally, it's tough for me to just sit here and be like, I really disagree because I don't necessarily know. Like I don't necessarily have all the information of why you change to this system. How effective is a lottery from preventing tanking? The NBA does a draft lottery, and they can't even get people on the floor for most of the games because the regular season doesn't matter in their eyes. So I maybe that's not the best example, but I'm trying to think of like, okay, anti-tanking. Yeah, football teams, but I'm watching football teams that should be tanking. I'm watching the Carolina. I mean, even though they're losing, I'm watching teams play close games. I'm watching teams that are bad stay in there. And if you change a couple possessions, you change some possessions in Carolina, they're not going to be picking as high in the draft as they will be because I don't actively think people try to go out to lose as much as possible. They might put a team together and make decisions that try to save their butt and make it more likely that they're going to lose. But I don't think by just instituting the draft lottery, you're going to fix the tanking problem. And in baseball, just because you have this draft lottery to deny tanking, that's not preventing people from not spending money and not keeping up with other teams, not re-signing players, not building competitive teams. That there are plenty of teams across baseball where they're just whatever. So I guess in reality, there's no it's hard to not the draft not being an incentive, like one that you can tangibly, obviously it's still there, but one that you can say, hey, we really stunk this year. Things did not go our way, but we have a chance to draft a franchise-changing player. And again, yes, you still can draft a franchise player in the top 10. I understand that. But when you have the first overall pick, you get a Harper, you get a Trout, you get a Strasburg, you get a Helton, you are more likely to be able to bring in that Hall of Fame player. And imagine the pulse around a highly touted holiday prospect coming back to the Rockies. that is a Rockies fans. I mean, that's the dream in ways. An exciting holiday player to come back and an offensive threat. Because my other thing with drafting is it's like with the Rockies, especially, you got to go pitcher, but golly, would it be cool to get the best ball player available in the draft? Because now even by the time you get to 4, you got 3 guys off the table. And if you're just, and at that point, if the goal is, all right, we got to get our arms, we got to keep doing our focus on pitching, you miss out on these offensive threats. You miss out on these potential big bats. That's what's such a bummer about not getting the number 1 overall pick this year, especially. That would have been really, really cool for the Rockies to be able to draft Ethan Holiday. I mean, it's a huge bummer. But you know, what can you do? I just am looking at like some of these other teams that struggle. I know there was stuff with like the White Sox and the Pirates and the A's and stuff. But I don't know. It's just fascinating with the way the lottery system works there. And I know it's different for as it goes on and it goes back to a normal thing, but I don't think changing the draft order there and making it a lottery has changed the philosophy very much of these teams. Like the White Sox, the A's. I don't know if you necessarily are discouraging these teams from doing what they've done, which is tanking in different ways. That people still tank. But again, you know, it's baseball. It's finicky with drafting anyway. But when you're talking about excitement generating storyline for the Colorado Rockies, getting their first overall pick in franchise history and being able to draft Ethan Holiday would have been a pretty darn good story. So pretty bummed. I want to dive into this article here that explains a little bit more why the Major League Baseball has switched to the draft lottery. Going to do that here coming up in segment number 2 of today's episode of Locked On Rockies. Before we do that, though, got to tell you about the folks that help make this show possible, and that includes FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place, so when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. And it's not just NFL action. You can get in on the baseball futures, join in on all the NBA and NHL action. Go check out FanDuel.com and join today. And you're going to get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. This is the Locked On Rockies podcast for free and streaming on your favorite streaming services, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk. Thanking you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, go check out our pal Sully and the Locked On MLB podcast, breaking down all things baseball from around the league. So, all right, I wanted to read this, and this is from 2023. So this is a year ago, but just to give some heads or some qualifications and some clarity as to why going into the draft, they're doing a lottery system. This is from Jack Bayer, MLB Draft Lottery Explained. How does it work? Which teams have the best odds? Who are the top prospects? So remember that this is from 2023. So I'm going to just skip the stuff that's relevant to that draft and focus more on the stuff that sets it up. One of the bigger wrinkles of the league's latest collective bargaining agreement was the introduction of the lottery to decentivize tanking. The jury is still out on whether it will make a meaningful difference in the Major League Baseball landscape, but the day now carries some automatic intrigue among the events in Nashville. There will be winners, there will be losers, there will be questions about how this newfangled lottery actually works. Here's the answers to some of those important ones. All non-playoff teams have a chance to win. And this is the question: which MLB teams? That doesn't matter. All non-playoff teams have a chance to win one of the top six picks in the draft, with odds decreasing as you move up in the standings. The odds for the three worst teams are identical, which is intended to remove any incentive to be the worst team in Major League Baseball. When Major League Baseball wanted to stop tanking, it really wanted to stop tanking. Not only do bad teams now face long odds to receive the draft picks that used to be handed to bad teams, but they also cannot win a top pick in consecutive years if they are a large market team or paid into revenue sharing. Those teams also can't pick earlier than 10th in back-to-back years. So this, the example that they're using here in this piece is the Washington Nationals, who are not in the top spot for the draft. So that means the A's, Pirates, and Tigers will face lottery disqualification next year if they end up in the top 6 this year. Teams such as the Angels and Mets would be in that situation next year if they win the lottery this year. This is again before the I believe it would be focusing kind of more on this season, but basically that's how it is. So I guess, yeah, it's still too early to tell, but I think we're already seeing the immediate impacts of I don't think the lottery is doing anything to discourage the tanking. I don't think the change in the draft and the incentives in the draft changed made a difference for the tanking teams or the teams that tend to tank. And I think that's the same for the Rockies. I mean, I don't necessarily think that they're sitting here saying that, you know, they've never even gotten the chance that had the first pick. So now you made it even more difficult to get it for it. You're not even guaranteed that top spot. I don't necessarily think it's going to change a lot of minds, because I don't think that will be the difference maker. I don't think that the White Sox are sitting there and saying, you know what, this draft thing, now we got to build the payroll up instead of cutting it like we said we're going to do. We got to add. We got to change this because we don't have a chance. How are we going to draft if we can't draft number 1 overall? How are we going to draft if we're going to get bumped out of this thing because of revenue sharing and XYZ? I guess tanking as big of a deal before in baseball? Am I forgetting about that? Especially because I think the way that I think the better way to discourage the tanking has been the expansion of the playoffs. I mean, now teams have a reason to buy at the deadline. Teams have a reason to not sell that key piece at the deadline. If you see a path to the postseason, you're more likely to take. You're going to try to follow that path. You're going to go for that. You're going to try to be that third wild card team. I think the tanking, measures would have been probably a little helpful when it was harder to get into the playoffs, when there was less action getting into the playoffs, and you really wanted that draft to be something different. I think now you're just making things worse, in my eyes, for the teams that have struggled. And again, I'm not pulling data. It's super early. It's super early on. We'll see how it changes. We'll see if maybe I'm wrong in looking at the philosophies, but teams that have had philosophies of being cheap or bad I'm not seeing a big turnaround in that over the past couple of seasons because of a lottery incentive. The baseball's draft still isn't talked about as like the football draft, like the basketball draft. Like it's still not viewed in that. And it has the nuance of you can draft these players, but the odds of them being MLB ready quickly is a total case-by-case basis. Instead of, if you're drafted in the first round of the NFL, there's a great chance that you have been drafted to get on the field that's next season, especially if you're in the top 10. So I guess when I'm looking at this and maybe I just got to get into the camp of give it more time to see if it's going to pay out. But I'm curious what you fans out there think. Do you think that now the Rockies not getting this first pick despite having the highest chances, do you think that the Rockies' experience with the draft lottery is changing their philosophy as a team, is changing their approach as a draft and develop team, as they call themselves. I'm not necessarily sure that's the case. I don't think it's I mean, I'm sure they were sitting there hoping that they got the first pick. They were sitting there saying, all right, this is great. And the Rockies wouldn't have even gotten the first overall pick if it was the normal system. They probably would. They'd be picking right around where they're at right now. So it's kind of weird for me to sit here and be up in arms that, they didn't get the first overall pick. Well, they weren't the worst team in baseball. So that goes completely contradictory to what you said. But that makes more sense to me if that's the order. And again, just because you're able to draft these players and look at the Nationals of where they have all ended up. Look at how many great people they've drafted, and they continue to get good spots in the draft. And then they don't even end up sticking with the team. The Nationals aren't paying and stuff. I didn't have the Nationals doing a 15-year, $760 million deal. I guess just the point is it's a mixed disappointment and just a little bit of doubt for me that this is the right system to go with. And because I think I'm a little bit just of the saltiness of not getting it and dropping to 4, even though they had the best chances. I think tied with one other team, because I think somebody got disqualified in the mix there for a top pick. I think it was the White Sox, actually. But I don't know. Maybe this is something that I'm not knowledgeable enough on, that I can't have the strongest of takes. But I do sit and wonder, what is the big outcome of all of this? What is the how well is this going to pan out for teams? Kind of lost my thought there. Sorry about that. Okay. Let me know what you guys think. Are you super disappointed, Rockies fans? I think we can all be a little extra disappointed this year because of the odds probability and the numbers telling us we had a good chance at it, mixed with the fact that you could have gotten the holiday. That's, I think, above all, I'm most disappointed that the Rockies can't draft Ethan Holiday. I really am. I think the story, I think all of that would have been really, 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 really cool. So, bummer for sure. All right, let's take a quick break. We're going to read some YouTube comments here and wrap up the show on today's episode of Locked On Rockies. Don't go anywhere. This is the Locked On Rockies podcast, for free and streaming on your favorite streaming services, bringing you daily Colorado Rockies talk. Hey, just a reminder that December is going to start our off-season month. Believe it will be, this is our last full week of shows for a little bit. And you're like, well, you were just off last week. But yes, but this is the point of the year where things are going to slow down a little bit. Kind of gives us some room to breathe here on the MLB side after being 5 days a week throughout the season. One-man show over here too on Locked On Rockies as well. So it just kind of gives us a little reprieve. But don't worry, we're still going to be having stuff going 3 days a week here, starting probably later in the month, closer to the holiday as well. But we'll still be bringing you plenty of Locked On Rocks here, so don't worry too much. But off-season stuff, we'll be keeping an eye, of course, on how the winter meetings progress. We'll see if the Rockies are going to end up doing anything more other than adding into that first base spot there by getting Thairo Estrada there to come join the picks. But we'll see. We'll see. I my other big hot take that I mentioned, though, is as it's continuing to bubble up, like, Arenado's getting traded, folks. Arenado is getting traded for sure. All right. Let's do some YouTube comments and finish up the show for today. Let's see here. Lux Ace, big time everydayer right here, says Estrada only signed for $4 million, so not bad. When I was listening to Bud Black and Bill Schmidt on MLB Network, I liked what I heard from them talking about the prospects, and now Chris Bryant has been having a healthy winter. But as soon as they mentioned wanting Chris Bryant to play the field 3 days a week, I didn't see the part where they said 3 days a week. I thought they were just talking about a little first base and a little right field. I immediately just lost it again. Like, how dumb you got to be. Good pod as usual, Paul. And Fried signed with the Yankees right after this was uploaded. Also, Rockies sold, so sadly we won't have Ethan Holiday. Yep, bummer on the Ethan Holiday stuff. And yeah, here's hoping that Chris Bryant is not going to be playing in the field 3 days a week. Again, I think the priority for Chris Bryant has to be offense, prioritizing that back health, putting him in the best situations to succeed. Rockies need him. The Rockies need someone. They need him to contribute, and they need him to build around Brenton Doyle and Ezekiel Tovar. TK says, it is amazing how this team cannot get the first pick, and those darn Nationals get another one. The Nationals, well, let's see. Washington Nationals 2020. Did they get there? Did I just skip over that? Yeah, they did. So they will get Ethan Holiday. I mean, again, and we mentioned it. It's like, all those great players that they're able to draft. And that's an interesting can of worms, though, that the Nats have had. It's gotten them a World Series, right? It has panned out. They did win the World Series. So, but keeping that elite level talent, keeping those players on your team for long term. Look at Harper. Look at, there's another example there for the Nationals there. I think, is Strasburg the only one that stuck with the team the whole time? And you can, we're talking can of worms, Strasburg situation, total can of worms situation there. So that's another interesting kind of wormhole with that first overall pick thing as well. But I still would have happily taken Ethan Holiday as well. And Silk Bucket says, I think the question is, how will Soto's record-breaking deal affect LeBron's legacy? Not necessarily the Rockies question, but actually, I do like this comment because it is fascinating when you look at the money of baseball, when you look at the contracts of baseball, when you look at that. Soto's going to make, I can't remember who it was. There was a stat saying that it was LeBron James's combined, and I believe it was someone else famous. I want to say maybe it was Tom Brady or something like that. Some other super famous, super successful athlete. Soto's going to make more than they have combined in their salaries paid by the sport. Obviously, I think LeBron James has made. I think LeBron James made quite a little bit of money in his life there. But it is interesting there to paint that picture of there is so much money in baseball, still that these type. I mean, again, Arenado's sitting there saying, "Dang, I should have opted out." Because these contracts are wild, man. And I think it will come to a boiling point. I think it will come to a situation in which, like, this is how it's always been. Now it's just switched from the Yankees to the Dodgers and now the Mets able to do these things. But you're curious on how will Juan Soto impact LeBron's legacy? It's just the contract. It's the money of baseball. When you're talking about that, that is going to be the thing that's like, baseball might not have the same popularity as those other sports, but golly, is the money still there? Is the money still invested? And is it still probably one of the best ways if you are super successful to make it big, to make it real big when it comes to your contract there on the field. So, and thank you so much. Again, best way to interact with the show is by going to Locked On Rockies on YouTube and firing off your Rockies hot takes in the Locked On Rockies YouTube comment section. That's going to do it for today's episode, folks. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day. You can go check out Locked On MLB with our guy Sully for your second listen of the day. And if you need more Colorado sports coverage, Locked On Broncos, Locked On Avalanche, Locked On Nuggets, Locked On Buffs, all free and streaming on your favorite streaming services. Until next time, this is Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Rockies podcast.